Hello everyone and welcome back to Java. This is tutorial number 19, and long time no see. I was going to do a tutorial and then I was like, I don't know what to do it on, then I was going to do more of the graphics, which we will get to later, in maybe next tutorial after that. We'll get back to that program and finish the physics. And I was like, alright, I think I got this, and so I started making all the code for that, and got that already, and then I got a head cold. So anyway, head cold's gone, and I got an interesting user question. It was a kind of a full-fledged assignment. They were wondering kind of how they should structure their program, what they're looking for, and so I thought I'd take an interesting component of that assignment and kind of show how that would work and extend your knowledge. If you've been watching my tutorials up to this point, you already know what array lists are and how to use them. We'll be kind of refreshing your memory a bit, but we're going to extend on that knowledge, and if you haven't seen it yet, if you don't know what array lists are, go back to the ArrayList tutorial, and that'll help you catch you up to speed. But as far as array lists, we're going to be using those today as kind of, this will be a natural next step, and it'll be how to actually use array lists for something useful. Say, for storing data that you don't know quite what it is, and you want to retrieve it given a certain name. So say I had an object, and I wanted to be able to set location. Or say set description. I wanted to be able to set description, so I do object.setDescription and then a string, blah 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 blah, and that would be the description. Then I could do object.getDescription, and it would return that string blah 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 blah, and I'd be able to interact with the object using that kind of form of communication of setting and getting data. Now, what if we don't know whether it's a description or not? But originally, when we make the object, when we actually program the object, we don't know what all data is going to be set, but we want it to be able to be retrieved by a name, kind of like that. Well, we can do it in a similar way using array lists in conjunction with some kind of tricky Java foo to basically make it so you can do get, and then you do a string that says description, that'd be the identifier, and then you can have your data, so .set description and then .get description, and it'll pull that data back out of that object. So that probably sounds really confusing. Don't worry, we'll explain it here and it'll make a lot more sense when you actually see it working. So the idea of this program is that a user can enter as many times as they want data with a certain identifier like description, color, whatever, and they can assign data or information to that kind of descriptor, kind of that identifier, and then they can retrieve that information that they set based on the identifier they set for that information in the object. So, again, probably sounds confusing, we'll get into that more. I imported java.util here because we're going to use the scanner object, and then I'm going to make a new class, and that is going to be our data object. New class. Oh, actually, wait, I have data object right here. Never mind, we're all good. So I don't need this, don't need that. So public data object. Remember, it's not running as like an actual program, so it doesn't need a main method. It's running as an object, so it needs a constructor. And the constructor is when you do data object obj equals new data object, that's when this constructor is called. So as far as this goes, we don't really need to do much in the constructor. In fact, I don't really think we need to do anything because we're not going to be passing any variables. I'm going to import java.util.wildcard, and that'll be so we can use array lists. We're not going to be using scanner or random in this one, but we'll be using array lists. And I'm going to define some class array lists. So array list, remember an array list is kind of like an array, but it doesn't have a set length or a set size. It just keeps expanding as you add more to it. So I'm going to make the first one identifiers. Oh no, sorry. ArrayList string. It's going to be called identifiers equals new ArrayList string, like that. And so we now have a class variable ArrayList called identifiers, and that's where we're going to be holding all the things like description, color, whatever. And then we'll make a new ArrayList called data, and it'll also be a string. So, seems simple enough so far. We already have our constructor made, and so we want methods. We want a method where they can do public set data, or let's just do set. Yeah, let's do set data. and then string identifier, and string data. So if I make this object and I call set data, public static void set data. Okay, so void means it returns nothing, or it doesn't have to return anything, and static means it's basically a static method. It's not going to be changing, essentially. Kind of confusing topic, but basically that method is staying the way it is, and it's not using anything that's going to be dynamic. So anyway, inside of the set data, what do we want to do? We want to grab this identifier and somehow attach this data to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say identifiers.add identifier, like that. So we add the identifier to our little identifiers array list. I cannot make a static reference. Oh, sorry, I don't even need static here. What am I doing? Public void set data identifiers.add identifier. And so that'll add our whatever identifier the user is passing into this program into our array list. And then we'll create another, we'll add data to data.add data. So at this point, data. At this point, kind of what's nice about this is the index of identifier, of whatever this identifier is, this specific identifier, and the index of data are the same. Because even say this is the 7th thing we add, this should be the 7th identifier, and this should be the 7th piece of data. So, because of that, we should be able to associate these two based simply on the index number. However, we want to make this a little bit more advanced. This is kind of the simple version, but we want to make it so that set data can update too. So if you already use that identifier, it updates. So let's get rid of this real quick. We'll use that in a minute. But we want to say Boolean has found equals false. And then we're going to loop all the way through identifiers to see if it's already there. And if it is, then we are going to work with that location already. And if it is not, then we are going to create that identifier. We're going to add that identifier to our array list. Let me get a drink of water real quick. So, Boolean has found equals false. We're going to do a for loop for int I equals 0. I is smaller than identifiers.size. And really I could do either one, because ideally they should be the same size. And I++. So we're just going to do a simple for loop here, and loop through all the identifiers. And if identifier.equals identifiers.getI. Actually, I have a better way. Instead of doing a Boolean, we'll do an int index equals -1. If the index is not -1, then we know we found an identifier, because if we find an identifier, we'll set index equal to I. And then we'll do I equals identifiers.size, so that the loop will stop running. Now, coming out of here, if our index is greater than -1, so 0 or above, greater than or equal to 0, then we have found that identifier somewhere and it's already been used. So, instead of making a new identifier, we want to update the existing information. So, one way to do this would be to, there's kind of multiple approaches. You could remove the identifier and the data and then add it again to the end, which for our purposes would work because it doesn't have to be in a specific order. Or we could modify the existing entry only in data and leave identifiers alone. For the sake of it being just easier to program and not that big of a performance hit really, I'm going to delete it from both array lists. So so if index is greater than -1, then we want to do identifiers. I spelled that wrong. Let me do that again. IDENTIFIERS dot, and we'll do down here remove int index. The reason I didn't put this in here is just because that way if we want to, at a later point in time, be able to quickly modify this identifier, this whole thing, it's nicely separated. We could just as easily put whatever code we're putting in this if index is greater than -1 right in here and ignore this index part. Both will work perfectly fine. This is just to make it a little bit easier to follow through in your head. It has nothing to do with performance or usability. And then we'll do data.remove index. So if the index of, say, the identifier description is 3, then it'll remove the identifier and the data at 3. So those two should correspond. And then after this, we're going to add the identifier back in. Regardless of whether the index was greater than -1 or not, we want to now add the identifier, because if it was already there, it's been removed, and if it wasn't ever there, it's still not there. So either way, we have to add it again. So identifiers.add, and actually we did this before, Control V. Identifiers.add identifier, data.add data, and that should be good to go. Now we need another method, public void get data, and string identifier, string identifier. We don't need data because we're returning data. And actually, public void, it shouldn't be void, it should be public string. It's going to send back data. Public string, and yeah, we have to return a string. So it's yelling at us, but that's okay. So we're going to do, I'm going to recycle some of this code. And again, it could be a little bit more efficient and more compact. However, I think it's easier to understand by separating this into if index is greater than -1. So, otherwise we could just do an else statement here. Either would work. So, index equals -1, and you loop through it, and you see if you find the identifier. Now, again, if index is greater than -1, that means it found it, which is great in this case because we need to return data.getIndex. Those two should correspond. However, we should return that, return data.getIndex. However, it's important to realize that the index might not always be greater than -1. We might have not set that identifier and we're trying to get information out of it. So we need to return some other thing. Let's return a string that says identifier not found. Okay? So now we have a very simple little object here that we can add and retrieve data from. And we could also add a method, and I think I will, to actually maybe the next tutorial, if people are still interested in continuing this project a little bit more. Basically, doing another one that removes an identifier and its corresponding data. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. It'd be basically this exact same code base except without this part. So it's really not that big of a deal. In fact, we can make this a little bit more modular by making this in and of itself a method, and then it returns the index, and then set data and delete data both use the index. So that'd certainly be a possibility too. Or we could call delete data from here, in here, or here. So anyway, those are all possibilities, and I'll maybe do that in a future tutorial if people are interested. And again, very similar code base anyhow. So main class, this might be a little bit tricky. We got to understand what the user's asking for and then perform it. So I'm going to create a scanner object. Scanner in equals new scanner system.in. Alright, and that allows us to get input through the console. And then we're going to do system.out.println welcome to data boss. Yeah, capital. Nah, lowercase. What looks better? I'll just go lowercase. Registered trademark. And then it'll do a while true loop, because we want this to just be kind of an ongoing file information retrieval system. And we're not going to worry about being able to retain data once the program's finished. We could easily do that by saying when they gracefully quit the system, maybe with a command like exit, then it tells the object, hey, save your data somewhere where we can find it next time. And so it just makes a file, prints out all of its identifiers, and then next time it's constructed, it looks for that file and then reconstitutes its array list identifiers and data from that file. So that'd certainly be possible. But not worried about that right now. It's more, maybe next tutorial, again, if people are interested in continuing this project, we can make it into something pretty cool, actually. But, so while true, system.out.println, enter a command. Now, we're going to get a string command back equals in.nextLine. So the next line of the entry will be a command. And then we somehow have to parse this command. So we could separate it by spaces. However, we want the data to be able to have spaces inside of it. So I think what I'm going to do is, this could go either way. Actually, it could go a lot of ways. I think what I'll do is do kind of a command parser where I get the first word, and depending on that, I call a special method. So I'll have 3 methods here. I'll have a public, static, and actually I'll make a class object. I just jump around and do stuff, sorry. I'll make a class object right now, data object, data equals new data, I won't call it data, data obj equals new data object. And so we now have this nice little class object, and so we can refer to that object anywhere from any of the methods instead of having to pass this object back and forth, and it'd get to be a real headache. So, public static add. We'll have, what's it yelling at me for? Oh, void. Public static void add. Public static void get. And those are the only 2 methods we'll worry about right now. Again, future tutorials could have cooler stuff. So add and get. So if the first word of the command is add, then we'll call add. If the first word of the command is get, then we'll call get. And if it's neither of those, then we'll say, hey, invalid command, try again. Okay? So, if command.substring 2, substring of 2 is, substring of 3 would be counting 0, 1, and 2. Since these are both 3-letter words, this is just kind of a quick shortcut. Command.substring 3 dot equals ignore case. I want them to be able to spell add with any capitalization or get with any capitalization they want. Oops, whoa. Add. And each one of these will receive a string identifier and a string... Actually, no, it'll receive a string command, and then it'll parse it itself in here. So if command.substring3.equals ignore case add, then we want to call add with our command. Otherwise, we'll do an else if statement here. Else if command.substring3.equals ignore case get, then we want to call get with a string command here. And else we want to say system.out.println unrecognized command. And so let's just try this out real quick. Obviously the methods won't actually work properly. Org bucket. I don't need bucket. What are you doing? Stop. Run. Public static void main string args. Everything should be fine here. It's not wanting to run though. Let's try going here and going, where is it? Run as Java application, main class. There we go. Welcome to DataBoss, enter command. And if we say subtract, it better yell at us. Unrecognized command, enter command. Add. If we enter add, unrecognized command, enter command. Add. So I think what we need to do here is system.println command.substring3. See what it's printing out, because maybe we're having an off by 1 issue. Subtract. TRACT. Dot substring. Oh, I'm being stupid. Substring 03. Substring 03. String 03. And let's try that again. Adder. Enter command. Perfect. So it looks like what it did is it ran this and didn't fall to this else case. It hit this case and went to here. Just real quick, we'll do system.out.println add to confirm that it understood our command. So add, yay. So it's calling the correct things now. If you want me to explain the string real quick, if you do substring 3, it's saying 3 till the end. If you do 03, it's saying 023 for the characters. So yeah, that was just goofy. So anyway, if you have .substring 3, it'll take characters 3 all the way to the length of the string, -1, all those characters, and that's what it'll return. Substring 03 will return characters 0, 1, and 2. So now you know, and now I know too. So when you call add with your little command here, first you'll do command equals command substring 4. Why do we do this? 4 will start us off at right after add space. So 4 will get rid of the add and space. So then the next thing coming up will be, dun, da, 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 drum roll, the actual identifier. So string identifier equals command dot substring 0, the new 0, and command dot index of, and a space. So we want all the way from the start until the space. Once we take out add space, we want the start to the space, and that'll be our index. So let's just try this out real quick. System.out.println identifier. Okay. And we'll run this here. And we'll do add hello world. And it'll say string index out of range, -1. I know exactly why. Add hello world space. Enter. And our identifier was hello world. Perfect. Everything's working great. So now that we have our identifier, we also want to do, command, actually we'll do string data equals command.substring command.index of, and the space. So it starts at the space, index of, and that's the data. We'll do index of +1, and let's test that real quick. Enter command add hello cookies. Oh, I don't have a system. Okay, system.out.println command add plus command add identifier plus identifier plus data plus data, and that will be able to tell us all the information that this method now knows about the command we entered. So add hello cookies. So command add identifier hello data cookies. Perfect. Add hello cookies is saying we want to add to this data object under the identifier of hello the data cookies. So the identifier is hello and the data is cookies. Everything is working great. So now we just got to call this object, data object, data obj dot set, what do we call it? Dot set data identifier data. Alright. So this should work fine. Cannot make a static, oh, right, it's an object. Gotta get rid of this static because we're working with objects here. And that should work perfectly fine. Now we gotta make the get method. Why is it yelling at me? Cannot make a static reference to a non-static method add string for the type main class. Oh boy, fun. So public. Well, we could. The thing is, though, we could make an object in here, correct? Data object data ob equals new data object, like that. Correct? We should be able to. Yeah, so the reason it's yelling at us is simply because these are not, these aren't the main methods. So static void public static void, and then this is going to yell at us because it cannot make a static reference to the non-static field data object. Fun. I think the easiest way to do this would be simply to grab this code and put it in our main method. So instead of add, we'll just do this. And it'll yell at us about data object. Actually, no. I'm being totally retarded today. Private static ta-da, get rid of this, ta-da, and everything works, and life is happy again. Sorry, I'm tired. So everything works, everyone's happy. So now under get, we want to do data obj dot get data and our identifier. So we'll want to find our identifier, and our string identifier equals command dot substring 4, because 4 will be get space 4, and then that'll just go to the end. That should be good. And get identifier, and we'll want to do system.out.println data object.getData identifier. So let's run this program now and see how it works. Enter command add or add, I like it that way. Description, the best car in the world. Enter, and that should have added it. So now if we get description, it should say the best car in the world. And if we add description, never mind, and then get description, never mind. So it reset, it changed it, modified it, removed, and replaced that identifier's data. So let's add another identifier. Add, what else? Color red. Get color red. And so in that way, instead of having to be able for your program to have just methods, your object to have methods, get color, get description, set color, set description, with things like this where we don't know all the data we're going to be storing, we don't know what type it is, and we want to be able to reference it, and we don't want to be limited on how much data we can store, we can use this. Now, is this a very practical example? Honestly, no. One, we spent way too much time with these methods here and parsing through commands, but two, the way this would really be useful is if is in something like, say, an address book or something like that, where you want to be able to set this object, say maybe a contact object, with a bunch of data, and you want to be able to retrieve that data, and you don't know what exactly you're going to be setting for people, and in a GUI, people have custom fields where they can enter. You know how your normal address book says name, last name, phone number, email address, maybe location, just kind of depends on what app you're using and whatnot. Now we could make one that has custom fields, so the person could enter into the custom field the identifier, and then it would be able to add that data without needing a method set name, set whatever. It'd be set in the identifier, which is, say we wanted to add to someone's name a nickname. So we'd put nickname in our little special box on the GUI, and as the end user we would do that, and then we'd set their nickname for whatever it is, and then we'd click, accept or apply or whatever, and it would send that data to this identifier, this object, and it'd send that data under the guise of an identifier. And so that's kind of how you can use two array lists together for setting and retrieving an unknown amount of data with a understandable name, not like some weird pointer or keeping a list of indexes as a string or anything obscure like that. We're just setting and getting from identifiers. And the way we made this, a program could very easily, say the program has X amount of identifiers coming in from a database for whatever, and it needs to set them to a data object and have them quickly accessible. Well, instead of needing to have methods for each one of those types of whatever it is, or not really knowing where all the data is, or having to parse through weird string concatenation and stuff, instead we just do data object and we set and we get information based on a little key, a little identifier. It's like putting a little tag on something so you can find it later. And so that's kind of a more advanced application of array lists, and also some kind of interesting stuff in kind of the logic behind parsing commands. So anyway, that lasted longer than I thought. Hopefully it kind of made sense and I explained it well enough. The source code will be in the description below. There will be a link to, it'll be a zip file, inside it'll have a version of mainClass.java and dataObject.java saved as both .java files and as .txt files. It'll also have an executable that you can just run, a jar basically, that you can just run in like a command line, or on Windows you could double click it, and it'll allow you to do this kind of interaction that we've done, kind of to see how the program works. And it'll also have a little README as to kind of, just say like tutorial 19 and stuff. So that'll be in the stuff, or that is the stuff by the time you're watching this, in the little zip file in the description. So just go ahead and download that and try it out for yourself, and thank you for joining me.